Hello, I'd say good afternoon or good evening, except I'm not sure what time you'll see this since we're recording it, and you may see it at a different time later. It's evening for us while we start here. This is our first broadcast of Kennery County or the Response Editorial Staff Podcast. I am Rich Rosford, publisher editor.
Ken Nicholson, I run the website.
And Eric Syverson.
We're winging this, so hopefully this works out okay. If not, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Oh, we don't publish it.
That was a rhetorical question, I hope. So, and that's probably one of the things I'm going to have to work on is not saying I know I was doing radio with some other guys before. Two bald guys. Did I say again?
You did. Okay.
It'll probably
I'll
take a while for me to train myself to stop with the but I will work on it. You guys are welcome to correct me if you see me going into that. You're also welcome to jump in and take over here at some point. The point of this podcast is to discuss the issues of the day, things that we're writing about in our online publication at this point. And one of the things that we're talking about, the topic for today, I believe, is the story about LGIS.
Yes.
Local Government Information Service, which publishes 36 newspapers. And I'm making a very distinct point of calling them newspapers because the mainstream media and our beautiful and wonderful governor have decided that they're not newspapers. And I tend to disagree. In fact, I have a bit of a problem.
So looks to me like a newspaper.
Well, they've been saying it looks like a newspaper, and that's a problem.
Maybe I'm just the naive, uninformed voter, and when I look at this newspaper, I think it's actually a newspaper. Why would they say it's not a newspaper?
Well, they're claiming that it's full of bias, and I don't know if you can find the words of Governor Pritzker's letter. Radical stuff, it's.
I guess they're saying it's not a newspaper or a news production at all. It's a political advertisement or a political position paper or something like that.
So we got Pritzker's letter here. He says it's fake and misleading newspaper-style mailers. They're specifically designed to mislead readers into thinking they're legitimate journalism, when in reality, they're unlabeled ads attacking political candidates.
Is there anywhere in the letter here where they tell us what's inaccurate in what they read?
Not that I can find.
Well, the Northwest Herald story claims that the article they had about two teachers in District 200 saying that they were going to do critical race theory, that the one used a false name and the other one didn't work there or something. I don't know. They cast shadows of doubt on the legitimacy of those two people.
Okay.
So one story potentially had some poor sources in it.
Could be.
Therefore, it's no longer a newspaper.
I don't see where they questioned the people.
But yet, the Northwest Herald, who's writing that story, has never had a story that, they've had sources that lied to them or misled them.
The Northwest Herald is one of those unique papers that has never made a mistake.
Oh.
Including the time.
That's a claim to fame right there.
Including the time when they corrected Johnny Carson years ago. They corrected the story about the Enola Gay that was being fixed up for the Air and Space Museum at the Smithsonian. And somebody corrected it politically, so it read Enola homosexual.
Oh.
Or maybe they meant to do that. I don't know.
It wasn't a mistake.
Them, but, that was on Johnny Carson, and I think the time that they... can I use 4-letter words here?
Probably shouldn't.
Pardon me?
We probably shouldn't, because then if we use 4-letter words, then it gets marked as explicit, and then it doesn't get shown.
All right, so
Yeah.
a poop load of snow fell in, I think this was a 1987 story, I'm not sure about the year. But there was a front page story, and the cut line underneath this photo on the front page after a big snowstorm was that a poop load, although it didn't say poop load, of snow fell. So I think we can assume that maybe the Northwest Herald has made one or two mistakes in its past as well.
But
So I guess
why does it matter? I mean, this was written by somebody, and it was published when somebody paid for the publishing, and it was distributed when somebody paid for the distributing. Is there anything illegal in any of that?
no, but it says that the JB for Governor campaign was extremely disappointed and utterly shocked that Paddock Publications
enough?
did that.
Is
So
that enough for them to be disappointed or
There's-
shocked? Or
There's nothing here that even has a publication's name on it.
the mailing permit, I guess, comes back to Paddock Publications.
Okay, if you have a magic machine that reads.
Yep.
those things.
Yes.
Point being, the media
So-
in general is biased. I can't remember the
So-
last time I read something that was simply not biased.
Because Paddock Publications is printing this clearly not a newspaper, it demeans their journalists. That's what Pritzker's campaign says.
Why does Pritzker care?
Because it demeans the value of their journalism. And
Either
he was
that-
going to participate in their forum because he thought it was going to be legitimate journalism, and now that's in question, so he's not going to participate.
Either that, or he doesn't like the idea of somebody publishing something that isn't, glowing on his reputation, his sterling.
He was just worried about the reputation of the Herald, the Daily Herald.
That's good. That's big.
Okay. that's
I mean, I think really one of the big questions here is who gets to decide what is journalism, and who gets to decide what journalism is properly done, is
Well,
done journalistically.
when you're the one doing the printing, you get to decide whether it continues to be printed or not.
I've seen a lot of stuff put out by Mr. Pritzker's campaign that I got problems with personally. I don't understand, and I didn't call up his publisher and tell him they shouldn't do that. Right? And nowhere does Paddock say, or I haven't heard, that Paddock sides with what is said here. They simply printed it for money, right?
Yeah.
So that's a business.
So their response back to Pritzker is saying that it was a business decision, and that the business department and the editorial department are separate. When they're printing a newspaper and there's a big scoop on the front page of one of their competitors' newspapers, they don't, steal that and go and tell the editor, hey, you need to run this story.
Or they would lose that business.
Yes. And so they just print what, they're capitalists, and they print what stories are brought to them, and they don't endorse them, and they don't censor
So
them.
why did
And
they cave here?
that's a good question.
So what's the upshot of this whole thing? Did Paddock not decide
Paddock has canceled the contract.
Yeah, so Paddock is,
with LGIS?
yes. So they will no longer print their stuff.
My gosh, why?
Well, here's their letter to basically an apology letter to their.
Because perception is everything in politics.
From the Daily
Or perception
Herald.
is everything, especially in politics.
What was
Implying that what they're doing is politics, not journalism.
What is the perception of journalism as a whole in this country right now?
Pretty rock
I
bottom.
mean, it's never been really good.
Yeah.
I mean, years ago when I started into journalism school, I was seeing studies that showed journalists and used car salesmen were kind of on par. That's not. Sorry, nothing against
With
used
the
car
used
salesmen.
car
but,
salesman coming in first a lot,
yeah, well, it's not a glowing recommendation of journalists. And today, I don't think it's half or a fraction of what it was back then. 25, 30 years ago. So the idea that, they're concerned about perception is almost laughable as far as I can see.
Well, just from that first statement they have there, that perception is everything, especially in politics, says that what they're doing is politics, not journalism.
True.
Because that would be the only reason that they would not continue to print it if they were really concerned about freedom of the press, or if they were really concerned about being unbiased. You would think they would allow it to continue.
The thing about journalists is that usually they are ready to just launch into an attack on anybody that threatens journalism anywhere. I was the advisor to the student paper at McHenry County College, and the position came open because my predecessor had some health issues and there was a lot of stress. Well, the stress was brought on because the student paper at McHenry County College was doing a column that somebody objected to, and when it made the news, when a congressman was brought in to question this, actually a state senator was brought in to take a look at this issue, the USA Today ran to their defense, and this story was run all over the country because journalists are out there protecting journalists. Why didn't they protect journalists now?
It's a good question.
I think that's a real big question. I'm stunned by Chicago Journal wrote an article about this, and I think they gave an example of.
So Chicago
bias.
Journal is a Shaw publication?
I don't know that it's Shaw. It's I'm sorry, I should have looked into that before we met here.
Oh, it's a Challenge Media publication.
Right. There is a paragraph here where they talk about the state of Illinois has guidelines, and this when I start in guidelines, it's underlined and it's a link. The state of Illinois has guidelines for what qualifies as a newspaper for the purpose of publishing legal notices, etc. And the state law requires, this is no longer underlined or part of the link, and state law requires that a newspaper must print at least once per week for at least 50 weeks per year and for at least 1 year to qualify as a newspaper in the state. Well,
Why do we care?
we should care a lot. Is the state going to be starting to tell us what is a journal, what is a newspaper?
Only
the
for
state-
taxing purposes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you click on this,
So-
this link here, where do you go? You go to a regular membership description of what's required to become a member of the Illinois Press Association.
So that's the definition of the journalism field, by the journalism field, of what constitutes a newspaper.
Right, and
Okay.
right now I'm not real confident in their ability to be unbiased in that definition to begin with.
If I find this in my mailbox, I really don't care if they think it's a newspaper or not.
Right.
It's
The
information.
only consideration here is as far as like you were saying with legal notices.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a question requirement that the state has apparently said what's required for you to publish a legal notice and have it be considered legally.
A published legal notice.
Right.
Yeah.
The other.
I think there's
question-
more to that. I think there's circulation numbers and proximity to where the notice is for and stuff too.
That may
But
be.
yeah,
The other things that are considerations are postal rates. And if you're publishing with postal rates, you have to have there's a limit on the amount of advertising contained, which I believe is like 40%. So at the maximum, you can have 40% of your content in a newspaper it can be advertising.
Before it's,
Before it changes its postal rate, you're paying a different rate to deliver
Right,
the paper
because-
through the post office.
advertisements, like you get from the grocery store or whatever, those are distributed at a different rate.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
fine.
Right. That, and then there's for tax purposes, if there are any tax advantages.
and we don't have to worry about that in here. There's not that many ads in there. Very few ads in the LGIS papers.
They
So it
don't,
couldn't
have,
have been
they don't
absurd.
have a problem with that at all.
Um,
There was some mention here of having at least 4 pages. They've got 4 pages. There are actually 4 pages with a broadsheet. There aren't too many broadsheets left anymore today. They're more than 4 pages. I apologize, there are 8 pages in this issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And very few ads. I don't see one yet. There's one.
And there's content in there that's specific
It's
to
an ad
McHenry
for
County.
Mr. Pritzker.
There's more content in there that's specific to McHenry County than you'll normally find in the Northwest Herald.
Yes.
That's published here in McHenry County and only publishes here in McHenry County.
You know, the real judge of whether a newspaper is a newspaper is the reading public. If a 10-year-old decides to write a story on a piece of paper with a crayon, and his dad makes copies of it and they mail it out, they can consider that a newspaper. Who's to tell them that otherwise? If you look at you had the First Amendment up here earlier.
Why would Paddock Publications cave then? What leverage did Pritzker use?
Forgive me, can we sort of start at the top just with the facts of what happened? Or if you like, I'll summarize it and you tell me if I'm
Okay.
These kinds of documents, like the McHenry Times, published by LGIS, that's the organization that creates it, right? LGIS went to Paddock Publications, is that the company name?
Yes.
And paid as a service for them to print them and also distribute them, I believe, under their permits and things like that.
Yes.
So Paddock Services took it from written and organized stuff to published and distributed stuff for a service fee. The Pritzker campaign, when they learned the content of at least a couple of these publications, contacted Paddock to complain that these were highly biased documents.
Actually, they didn't contact them directly. They put out a press release that then Paddock, addressing Paddock and addressing the Daily Herald, but they did not directly contact them about it, which is what you get from the Daily Herald letter that went out,
Okay.
was that they were not directly contacted first.
That's interesting. And that Paddock, for reasons described in the letter, I reckon, decided to cease publishing this stuff for LGIS.
They canceled the contract.
They canceled the contract. Interesting. I wonder what constitutes the breach.
I think the reason Paddock did that is because they had a forum planned with Pritzker and with Darren Bailey, and Pritzker had said because they were publishing these for LGIS that he would not participate in the forum.
Okay, is the forum going to go on?
You were saying that you thought he was going to look to get out of the forum anyhow.
Well, he has not yet, even though LGIS is no longer going to be able to be printed by Paddock. He has not committed to participating in the forum. It's 3 days from now.
It's a forum, not a debate, or
Yeah, it's a forum. They're calling it a forum. I don't believe there's going to be a live audience. I believe it's just going to be the people asking the questions from the Daily Herald.
Is it COVID?
Because they're going to broadcast it all across the state, and they're going to use it. It's the Illinois, they call it something Journalism Association.
Illinois Press Media Editors.
Okay.
Associated Press Media Editors.
Yeah.
So there's a number of newspapers
Yep.
that are going to receive.
Yeah. Dozens of newspapers are going to receive the content to be able to cover it throughout the state.
And so, we don't have any answer from Pritzker's office whether or not he's going to participate.
So the most recent thing from the Daily Herald shows that they have talked with his campaign manager, but that he has not committed to attending the forum.
And when you were hypothesizing that he might not want to get into a debate with Bailey at all, that was based on what?
Well, as soon as there's coverage that's not favorable to him, he is trying to shut it down. So if there's the potential that they would print coverage that was not favorable to him, he's not willing to participate in their debates.
So I think if I understood before, what you were saying is there's really no upside to him getting into the debate. he sees himself as, the incumbent with the.
He has the name recognition. He has the power to control the narrative, apparently. And so, what value would there be for him to go and have to answer questions that might sway voters?
He's in a debate, he might not be able to control the narrative.
Well, that seems to be his concern. That seems to be his concern, is that he can't control the narrative. If they're going to print things that are not favorable to him, then maybe they would print something not favorable about the forum in their own publication.
In the Northwest Herald story, can you guess what he threw out there about these publications? Do we have a timer?
Jeopardy music?
I know I can't guess.
That would have to be the race car.
Yeah.
He accused these publications. See if I can find it in the Northwest Herald story here. By the way, they also talked to Don Craven, the president of the Illinois Press Association, and I'm disappointed in him. I left a message for him asking him to call me today. He did not return my call. But I think Illinois Press Association should be standing up for the rights of people to be journalists if that's what they choose to be.
I couldn't agree more with that.
He said, all we can do is point out to people that those publications are not what they may appear to be. That was Don Craven's quote. You got to pay attention to the source of what you're reading.
And what source is he talking about? So anyhow, Pritzker was asked about, and I'm reading this directly from Shaw Local's September 17th article. Pritzker was asked about the publications at an unrelated news conference on September 8th in Harvey. He called their content complete hogwash, centered around racist messaging.
What?
Centered around racist messaging. Quote, it's clearly all about the idea that black people are threatening your way of life, he said of the publications. That's essentially what Prop is putting in these publications. It's a scare tactic. It's meant to have people concerned about their safety.
So I think he's specifically referencing the edition that's mentioned on the front page of there that's coming the next week. Specifically, it's all centered on the Safety Act. And so he's implying that anybody who would have concerns about the Safety Act would have those concerns because they are racist.
What?
I think that's what's being implied by Pritzker's
I'm sorry,
quote.
I don't buy any of that.
So,
Well, I think that is the implication of the Safety Act. The Safety Act was brought on after the George Floyd riots, and it's supposed to be a response to, police views, white privilege. We've got too many black people.
and because it was passed here in Illinois, we know it was all done on the up and up, and it was all debated, and it was well documented what they were doing, and it wasn't passed in the middle of the night by completely gutting a shell bill and just throwing it in there and passing it. While nobody was looking,
You're playing
right?
devil's advocate, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Since when? Right.
Now, but the Safety Act is one of the big things that they were having a problem with, which was mentioned in one of the stories that I read.
Well, I personally, for instance, have a big problem with the Safety Act. And when I see...
Which I think should probably be our next episode, is on the Safety Act.
I think that's a great idea. I actually have something to say about that. Why would Pritzker ever be in a position, why would a governor ever be in a position to shut down a business relationship just because he doesn't like the news that comes out of it?
Why would a governor be in a position to shut down an economy for 2 years? To require people to wear masks as long as he did?
Same question.
To push the way he has for vaccinations. He has been involved in that too, right?
Same question. What it comes down to though is I'm really disappointed that Paddock made the decision they made, because they never said, they are not to be confused with supporting the points of view of these publications.
even-
They make that clear in their publications.
Even
That's not their.
they're implying that by their statement that they're honest journalism and this is not.
Yes.
I got a lot of evidence to the contrary there.
Right. I believe that
So-
the honest journalism, what they call honest journalism, has done a terrible job of illuminating what the Safety Act means to the American people. And they're doing this because they don't want it to hurt Governor Pritzker. I believe that is what they're doing. Now that's just, my
What happened to
tinfoil hat, but
What happened to freedom of speech here? There's
Well-
no libel or slander here, or at least no accusation thereof from Pritzker, right? There's nothing at all false here, I'm guessing.
And so he didn't, in his role as governor, tell Paddock they could no longer print them. He just said he wasn't going to participate in their forum because they had
It
printed
wasn't
them.
even their forum, they happened to be.
And he didn't do that in his capacity as governor. He did that in his capacity as a candidate. So it is his right to free association. He can choose to not associate with them.
But let's look. There's a little pattern here. Let's look at what was it? 51 top NSA, former NSA leaders, whatnot, that signed off saying that the Hunter Biden laptop had every. It was very carefully worded. Had every earmark of being Russian disinformation. They didn't say that it was disinformation. They didn't say anybody. They didn't tell anybody they couldn't do any of it. They just said it has every earmark of it. Well, now we're finding out it's absolutely true. There's nothing Russian disinformation about it. It's an honest-to-God laptop that really ought to be making a lot more news, and I recommend all of you get out there and read Miranda Devine, I think that's her name, her book, Laptop from Hell. It is an indictment of not just Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, his brother Jim Biden, but the entire political system.
You can't believe that Hunter that was really anything bad on Hunter's laptop without wearing a tinfoil hat. That's all conspiracy
Oh, I have
theories.
one right here.
Well, we have to start wearing tinfoil hats. By the way, before we forget, I did want to plug my book. This is a book. What are you laughing at?
No, I'm not laughing at you, brother.
This is The Burning Sea of Iron Bottom Bay. It's written for teens of all ages. A great-grandfather comes to live with his great-grandson and shares his experiences in the U.S. Navy during World War II.
At Guadalcanal, or in the bay in front of Guadalcanal.
It ends up having, it ends up being more than a history story for the boy. He actually learns a little bit about how to deal with challenges in life today.
I enjoyed it.
So
And
the book,
I am not a teenager.
well,
Working on it.
it is available on Amazon, and it's on my website. Do we have it directed by? Well, go to richpublicity.com and you'll find a page for it there.
There's
Anyhow, I loved writing this book. I'm planning to write some more books for teens, stories that they're not getting elsewhere.
I'm looking forward to the Audible version.
I've created the Audible version. I'm waiting for it to show up on the page, or to find out if there's something else I need to do. My impression is it should be going there. It should be loading up on the page anytime now. So,
all right.
So, the freedom of the press and the freedom of speech, it's guaranteed that the government can't tell the press what they can and can't print. Guaranteed. Well, we are the press is protected by the.
so if they're implying that there are standards that need to be upheld here, are these standards being held to them? Are they being held to these standards? Is that how it should
Well,
say?
they're not setting the standards. They're just.
But they're implying that there are
Yeah.
standards.
Again,
So has the government ever said that there's a limit on what can be printed, and that newspapers can't print, things that would be negative towards Congress or towards the president?
it simply says that Congress can make no law that limits what is said.
Well, have they ever tried?
they're apparently trying now.
Well, they did the sedition acts. They said you couldn't write anything that was negative about the president or the vice president or Congress, and those were never overturned. They sunsetted at the end of the time, but they were never overturned as unconstitutional.
Well, the Supreme Court never ruled on it.
And it was a different time, different political atmosphere, and different motives.
But I think the Bill of Rights is timeless. So if it was
It
okay
is.
then, with the Bill of Rights, was it okay now?
What the amendment says is it would be not right for the government to make any rules about what gets published. Now, we have separate laws to handle slander and libel.
Yeah.
Right, now the government has not done this. Right now.
What do you call Mr. Pritzker?
Well, he was wearing his candidate hat. He wasn't
I
wearing
don't
his.
really care.
The honest truth is that Pritzker has every right to go out and say that that's not a real newspaper and you shouldn't publish that.
I don't think he has that right, or he shouldn't have that right.
Well, then you're gonna limit his free speech.
I haven't done anything to try that.
As
What
long
they're
as he's
saying is
wearing
they're
his
saying
candidate hat, he should be able to say that, and he should be able to choose to not
He
associate.
didn't say he doesn't like it.
Even as governor, he has a right to say it. If he acts on it, then it's a problem. I'm defending Pritzker. Yeah, the last thing I expected him to be doing here.
You don't, yeah. and
But
you don't wanna
If
be
we're
doing-
gonna defend free speech, you have to defend free speech.
Yeah, I guess he can say things that aren't true,
I didn't say anything.
and
Right, I didn't, but why is...
but when he
act-
uses his position to bully a company into, changing into canceling a contract, that's different than him just exercising free speech, because he's
You're saying that it's gone across the line of free speech to an act.
yes. I'm saying that
And you could make that argument, and
As governor-
I don't know that they don't have a legal case here for a lawsuit.
yeah, as governor, part of that freedom of the press is that he has to be accessible to the press, and should be open and transparent with the press. And so if he's not willing to come and answer their questions, that's right there infringing on the freedom of the press and infringing on the rights of the people.
Did Governor Pritzker ever commit to coming to this forum? No.
Well, I think he was committed because his letter implies that he is backing out. So we simply cannot participate in the forum organized by the same organization that seems to have willingly shared a postage permit with a partisan political entity dedicated to slandering the governor and his policies. Moreover, we believe that Paddock owes it to Daily Herald readers to publicly disclose exactly what arrangements were made with Dan Proft and LGIS.
I would have a little bit more sympathy with that position if they enumerated anything that's slanderous in one of these publications. But they don't do that.
Beyond
Well-
are they calling for those arrangements to be visible with all publications? Or have they just singled out?
Those ones associated
LGIS.
with Dan Proft and LGIS.
We never explained to the good people the relationship between Dan Proft and LGIS. I believe that is, I know Dan
Is on the
is
board.
the head of the
So it's
PAC,
the People Who Play by the Rules PAC.
right?
He is
And
the
they are
president of
funding
that,
LGIS.
and they are providing a major portion of the funding to LGIS.
Okay.
And so Dan Proft is involved in politics. He's the president of a PAC. And so his motives in using the funds of that PAC would be in line with the motives that the PAC has set out as this is what their goal is. And so there's clearly a political motivation.
Shouldn't
But is that a problem?
the Daily Herald, when they're reading this letter from Mike Olin, his campaign manager, they can't figure out that there's a political motivation here?
Not
That there's nothing political behind these words?
not when it's our altruistic, honest governor.
public service announcement. This is the thing of devil's advocate. So sometimes when you're saying things, you got to keep in mind.
We need a little red sign here that says
Sarcasm.
sarcasm.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
like a light or something.
Yeah.
Or something, you know. Where were you?
The point is whether this is politically offensive should matter only to the person who reads it. And nobody's forcing Mr. Pritzker or his staff to read this. Right? If people want to read it, they're going to read it. If they don't want to, they don't have to. They certainly don't have to agree with it. But my gosh, it is the right of LGIS to contract with somebody.
And as an elected official, he should be making himself available to the press,
Much more
even
than he
if they disagree with him politically.
Right.
Yeah,
He should
has
be
made-
willing to
has
face
has he
press
made
who
any
disagrees
efforts
with him.
To reach out to them?
There's no record of that anywhere.
The one thing I found funny in the article is that there are people they're writing that there are people that are complaining that this mailing is showing up in their mailbox without them requesting it, and they want to know how to shut it off.
Well, wait until it gets close to the election.
Well, you don't
Their
have to
mailbox
wait till
is
it gets
gonna be
close- you don't
filled
have to
with
wait till it gets close
mailers.
to the election.
Yeah.
There's stuff coming in my.
At least this one has some
I went
content.
and I collected the mail today, and there was this thick of stuff that I put in the recycle box, and there was this thick of stuff that was mail that we were going to actually look at.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
that's standard procedure. So if you don't want to read it when it comes to your house, put it in your recycle bin.
there's some
What are you
actual
complaining about?
content in here that a lot of those political mailers are just campaign slogans. This one has the test scores for the school districts in McHenry County, 2019 to 2021, a comparison of how the schools did in math and in English.
As affected by COVID, you mean, or
Yes, to show potentially what effect did COVID have, and that's what's being implied. But I guess correlation is not necessarily causation. But
I love that
all of them have gone down.
I love that they are doing this, that they're printing this and putting it out, because you're getting one message from the media,
I
and
do
it's
too.
not a fair message. I'm watching the other day. I got the ABC local news on, and they're covering the flight. The governors Abbott and DeSantis are flying some people up north.
Right.
And you watch this news program, and it says they flew these people up north, and then it went into basically discussing how terrible and inhumane this was.
Because they lied to him. They told him that they'd have places to live and that they'd have jobs.
Except it turned out that these people had signed something that they hadn't been lied to. But beyond that, I mean,
Well, why didn't those?
Wait. What is the reality of this immigration story? The reality is that there's like 14,000 people that have been shipped north. It turns out in Texas that while Abbott has shipped 3,000 something up north, the one Democratic mayor of El Paso has shipped 6,000 something north. Now, never mind that Biden was secretly shipping immigrants north in the middle of the night, flying them into airports so covertly they could sneak these people into cities up in the north. Never mind that. You got 14,000 people. 50 people showed up at Martha's Vineyard, and everybody's in an uproar about that. These states have had 2 million immigrants enter their state this year. What the heck are we talking about? 50 people, 14,000? That's nothing. That's a drama. I don't understand. It boggles my mind that the media is ignoring this and they're portraying it this way. There's absolutely no honesty in the media.
That bothers me because
I think we found a topic for a third episode.
I think we probably kept people for long enough.
Yeah.
For this one, but we'll be back to you with a better topic next time.
Now a message from our sponsor, Guns and Such, which just happens to be where we are filming this. So, Eric, you want to say something about Guns and Such?
Check us out at gunsandsuch.com.
Cool. Thanks, sir. By the way, you provided all the gear here. Appreciate that.
Thank you if you've listened this long. Thanks for listening. Next time, maybe we'll have some food. So you can watch us eat?
No, no.